Köszönöm a lehetőséget. My name is Edina from the University of Eötvös Loránd, Budapest, the Department of Translation and Interpreting. Can everybody see my slides? Hopefully I managed to share them.
Yes, we see.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really grateful to be able to talk about my passion, translation and revision. This is my main research topic. And today, just very briefly in these 15 minutes, I'd like to talk about the quality of translation revision. We need to talk about the quality because translation revision has become a major tool in quality assurance of translation services, as the quality standard states that all translations need to undergo revision. Revision includes the examination of the target language content against the source language content for any errors or other issues and its suitability for purpose. And the reviser needs to be a person other than the translator. The reviser needs to correct the errors or recommend corrections. If you'd like to expand on the definition of revision, what revision actually entails, I'd like to provide a more extensive definition. Revision task involves the correction of errors and deficiencies so that the resulting text is accurate in content, linguistically correct, equivalent to the original, processable for the receiver, and ready to print. And all these according to the requirements of the assignment, the expectation of the receivers, as well as the norms and terminological system of the target language. So we are talking about a fairly complex task that revisers need to be able to complete. And if they need to do this task, perform this task, they need to adhere to a set of principles. Mossop, in his book on translation revision, provides us with 20 principles for revision. Some of these are more practical advice, and I'd like to summarize these 20 principles in just a few sort of guidelines. First of all, revision needs to be efficient. Efficient in that all corrections need to be completed, but also in a way that it doesn't require too much effort, and it also pays well. The reviser needs to modify as necessary, so shouldn't intervene in the text unnecessarily, must eliminate all problems, and should not introduce further errors in the text. The reviser should stay consistent in the corrections, so if the reviser decides to correct a problem at the beginning of the text, then this correction needs to be followed up all through the text and not abandoned in the middle. And first of all, the reviser needs to make conscious decisions about the modifications of the text. So he or she can give feedback to the translator why certain interventions were introduced in the text. I like to summarize these guidelines as Minimax strategy of translation revision. For me, this means that the revision should include minimum intervention for maximum result. The maximum result and the minimum intervention not only refers to the number of modifications, but also the extent of modifications. So if there's a problem in the text, the modification, the correction needs to be made in a way that it is transparent and not deleting whole sentences, but I will come back to this a little bit later. Revision needs to be...
Sorry, Edina, the slide is not moving.
The slide is not moving, okay. So I'll stop sharing and start again. It's a shame because I had a funny cartoon on. Okay. Are the slides moving now?
Yes. you.
Okay. So just to go back on my thoughts, the principles of revision may be summarized as Minimax strategy of revision. So revision should include minimum intervention for maximum result. Minimum intervention refers to the number of modifications and also to the extent of the modifications. They need to be minimally invasive in the text. And I like to call this the laparoscopy of quality assurance. I will come back to this thought a little bit later. Mossop calls our attention to the fact that revision not only includes correction of the text, but also improvements. So not only revision serves the purpose of correcting the actual errors in the text, but also making it more suitable, making it more acceptable for the readers. For this, in order to serve the purpose of correction and improvements, the revisers employ revisional operations. Correction is served by rule-based modifications. These are obligatory, motivated by the rules of the language, semantic, morphological, and linguistic rules of the language. And also by norm-based modifications. These are optional. So revisers have may choose whether to employ these modifications or not. These are motivated by the customary language use of the language. But there are also improvements to be done, and these are done by strategy-based modifications on the part of the reviser. These are optional and motivated by the expectation of readers and the principles of communication in order to make the text more processable for the receivers. When revisers employ these revisional operations, revision proves to be effective. So these modifications, these operations serve the improvement of quality of translations. There may, however, occur problems in revision. Künzli talks about negative correction when revision does not serve its required purpose. Translation quality is not improved when the reviser employs unnecessary modifications, and then we talk about over-revision, or errors remain in the text. We talk about under-revision or mis-revision. Under-revision when not all errors are eliminated from the text, or the reviser introduces new errors into the text, or employs incorrect modifications. Künzli talks about negative correction. I find this term a little bit contradictory in itself, whether we can talk about correction that is negative. So I like to call problematic revision defective revision as opposed to effective revision. So when the reviser does not employ rule-based, norm-based, and strategy-based operations, but oversteps the boundaries, or cannot or does not follow the principles, we talk about defective revision. First, I'd like to talk about preference-based modifications and over-revision. Preference-based modifications are unnecessary, and they are motivated by personal preferences of the revisers. They have no effect on the text, and they do not correct or improve the sense or improve the text quality according to Arten's definition. They cannot be justified with any rules, norms, or strategies of the target language. The consequences are inefficiency, new errors may be introduced, and colleagues become frustrated if we intervene in the text unnecessarily. Also, if the text is modified unnecessarily based on preferences, translation assessment becomes impossible. I'd like to bring a couple of examples of preference-based modifications. In these two examples, the synonyms were introduced in the revised version of the text. They did not improve the text. They did not modify the text in a negative way, but were unnecessary to introduce. Coronavirus epidemic and COVID-19 epidemic are synonymous. Also, Euro area and Eurozone are synonymous expressions. Over-revision, we talk about over-revision also when we talk about too extensive modifications, when the reviser deletes whole sentences instead of just intervening in the place of the problem and just changing the problematic expression. This way, revision is not transparent. The translator, and also when we try to count the problems in the translated text, we cannot easily identify where the actual problems occurred in the text. So instead of doing extensive modifications like deleting whole sentences, revisers should just intervene where the problems are. And also, if we delete whole sentences, we run the risk of introducing more and more errors into the text. And here we come to the problem of under-revision, when errors remain in the text. Errors might remain in the translated text when the reviser fails to detect the problem. And if they fail to detect the problem, then they will leave the problem, the error, in the text. New errors might be introduced when there are unnecessary modifications in the correct text. Also, when the reviser detects and corrects the problem in the text, but creates a new error while making the modification. Also, when there's an intervention in the place of an error, but the reviser employs an incorrect modification, the text quality is not improved. Another case is when the reviser sort of detects that there is an error in a certain place of the text, but intervenes not in the right place and employs an unnecessary or incorrect modification, or fails to correct the existing error and perhaps creates a new one. So there are a number of dangers during revision where new errors might be introduced. Some examples of defective modifications can be seen in the following examples. In the first place, the expression "it feeds on" was replaced by "it fueled by," leaving out "is," and therefore this is an incorrect modification employed by the reviser. In the next example, the name needed to be modified to the word order of the name. Instead of the Hungarian word order, the English word order needed to be introduced. And so the reviser detected the problem, intervened, but in the meantime made a mistake and introduced a new error in the name, leaving out "o" from the name Virovac. The next example is a little bit more complex, and the reviser wanted to perhaps simplify the sentence structure, but while doing so, modified the meaning of the sentence, and therefore the revised version is not cannot be considered as an improvement of the translated text. The revision procedure consists of a number of micro steps, and in these micro steps, errors may occur that endanger the purpose and the quality of revision. When the reviser starts the work, they need to examine the target language content compared to the source language content. So comparative examination is the starting point. Then the problem needs to be identified and correctly diagnosed so that a conscious decision can be made whether an intervention is necessary and what kind of intervention is necessary. Then the correct correction needs to be employed. So the correct modification needs to be employed. So no new errors are introduced. Either correction or, as we saw before, improvement can also be introduced. When the reviser has done the modification, they need to check whether through the modification new errors were introduced into the text, and need to follow up their own modification in the text. And if this is done, then proper assessment of the translated text can be done. The evaluation of the translator's work can be done, and through the conscious decisions of the reviser and the justifiable revision or modifications, feedback can be given to the translator.
Sorry, and there are 2 more,
yes,
please. You have 2 more minutes, please.
Yes. The revision is done effectively if the reviser employs the revision sub-competences. We talk about a set of competencies specific to translation revision. These are different from translation competencies, and these sub-competencies need to be employed in the different microsteps of the revision procedure. Contrastive sub-competence needs to be employed to be able to check the text and analyze, and with analytic sub-competence to be able to detect the problem, localize the problem, and diagnose where the translator went astray or where the translator made a mistake. When the diagnosis has been done, so the problem has been identified, then the reviser may find the correct solution for the problem and makes the decision whether to intervene or not in the translated text. After the decision, employing corrective, transfer, or ameliorative sub-competence, the reviser intervenes, then checks his own work, and then through the evaluative sub-competence gives the feedback to the translator. Just to summarize my thoughts on the quality of revision, we need to keep in mind that revision may not always serve its purpose. Effective revision needs to be done through necessary modifications, through rule-based, norm-based, and strategy-based modifications in order to improve text quality. And this is when we can talk about effective revision. There may also, we must account for the possibility of defective revision. So reviser's work also needs to be checked, because we can talk about under-revision when not all errors are corrected, over-revision when unnecessary modifications are introduced, and misrevision when defective modifications occur during revision. Text quality thus is not improved, and translation assessment is also jeopardized. To be able to avoid defective revision, and I'd like to refer back to Adam's presentation before, revision can only be done through by professional, well-trained revisers who are familiar with the revision task and familiar with the steps of the procedures of revision, and are able to make conscious and informed decisions. And for this, we need to develop revision-specific competencies that can also be started during translator training at our institutions. Thank you very much for your attention. Here are my references. Thank you.